Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. I am currently at my friend Jessica's apartment in Brooklyn, New York, and you see the background is very plain. She recently had her apartment painted and hasn't had a chance to put things up. I will pop in a photo here of what this railroad apartment is like. It's long and skinny, so it takes up the whole depth of the building, but only half. She said it used to be divided into two small apartments. They would have been pretty small. Anyway, I've been having a great time so far in New York. I've been here a week. I'm looking after Jessica's cat lady while Jessica is off on holidays. I've just seen so many great things. So starting with the Brooklyn Museum. There's a fabulous exhibit on there until June of 2025 called Solid Gold. And it explores how humans have been fascinated by gold and using gold from prehistoric times till now. So the good and the bad, lots of beautiful things like paintings that are solid gold. Yves Klein, who is known for his Yves Klein blue solid color paintings, he did some that were all in gold leaf. I didn't know that. And Agnes Martin has also done her signature little rectangles with a red enamel paint background and gold leaf applied on the top. What I've done is I put together a short video, just a few minutes long, that focuses on fashion designers from Dior to Mary McFadden, and how they've used gold in their designs. So if you're interested, stick around to the very end for that. And another thing that got me so excited at the Brooklyn Museum is they have a permanent exhibit of Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party. I'd never seen it live before, only images. It was fantastic. I just went around that table 3 times. You can see the back side of the tapestries, only when you're on the opposite side of the table. I just found it fabulous. And there was another exhibit that was all Elizabeth Catlett. And I didn't realize that I actually was familiar with some of her work. She's done linocut prints that I had seen before, but also these fabulous carved wooden sculptures. There was just so much to see. I had a fabulous day. I was there for 3 hours before I realized that I needed to stop for lunch. And then after that, I went back in to check out more. It really filled me full of art. And then really close to the Brooklyn Museum is the main branch of the Brooklyn Library. So I had to check that out too. And Jessica had left her library card for me. So I browsed through their new books selection, and I ended up borrowing one, which I'm going to tell you about a little bit later in this video. Also picked up some bookmarks. This one is the Brooklyn Public Library Book Prize, and Naomi Klein's Doppelganger is one that I picked up at the Greenpoint branch. Jessica had put it on hold for me because we're in a book club that's going to be discussing this on December 15th, so the day after I get home, and this gives me a chance to read it here. Oh yeah, and I also found these Brooklyn Book Match bookmarks. There was a whole bunch of them. And this particular librarian, Gretchen, she's the adult services librarian at the Red Hook Library. And she says, eccentrics, recluses, and the melancholics tell my favorite stories. Here are a few. And when I look at the list, there are 10 books, and out of those, there are several that I love too. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, Bear by Marian Engel, Pond by Claire Louise Bennett, and An Unnecessary Woman by Rabi Alameddine. So I thought, I got to try some of these other ones. Let me know if you have read any of these on the list. Toad by Catherine Dunn, Event Factory by Renee Gladman, Why Did I Ever by Mary Robeson, and The Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. Now, that last one, I saw on Goodreads that my friend Jessica gave it 1 star, so she didn't care for it, but I'm going to give it a go and see what I think. Okay, on to the books now. I've finished 7 since my last video, including 3 audiobooks. So let's start with Chlorine by Jade Song. The audiobook is read by Catherine Ho and Imani Parks. Jade Song is a debut author, and this is a coming-of-age story. It's told by Ren Yu, who's the only daughter of immigrant Chinese parents. Actually, her father has gone back to China and abandoned the family. And so she's a competitive swimmer. And the story is being told from her adult viewpoint, at which point she's a mermaid. And I felt like I was always a little bit on the wrong foot as I was listening to this, because I wasn't sure if it was fantasy or is this woman mentally ill as she's, recounting the events leading up to the point that she became a mermaid. It's body horror. It is, like I said, sort of disturbing, and yet I found it also really compelling, and it really evokes the nature of competitive sports and the pressures of a coach on young athletes, how coaches behave with female athletes, and also combined pressure of immigrant parents wanting their children to succeed in a new country. Now, this is also a sapphic story. Sometimes we get the viewpoint of a team member on Ren's team, Kathy, who has an immense crush on her. And Ren is aware of this, and whether or not she reciprocates is, I think, a spoiler, so I won't say anything more about that. Here's a little bit in Ren's voice looking back on her coach. Every pen stroke of his, whether it was crossing the T's or dotting the I's, slashed my heart with both ferocious anger and wretched, unwanted affection for the diabolical man who had controlled so much of my fate. He was always doing questionable things. Now I interpreted his actions as wrong and inappropriate, but it was too late to stop him. Yes, I was just filled with a mounting sense of dread as I listened to this. It's been compared to Julia Armfield, Melissa Broder, and Carmen Maria Machado. And I think those are all fair comparisons. So if you like any of those writers, I would suggest giving Chlorine a try. And this next audiobook has an entirely different mood. It's Going to Beautiful by Anthony Bidulka. The audiobook is read by Mark Demeda, and this one was recorded by the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. It's the first time since I worked in the Library Access Division at Edmonton Public Library that I've listened to anything recorded by the CNIB. But the print publisher for this is a small one, Stonehouse Publishing, and it had been years since I'd read anything by Anthony Bidulka, who's a gay writer from Saskatchewan, and he's written a whole bunch of mysteries dating back into the 80s. This one is a recent book, and in this story, we have an international celebrity chef, Jake Hardy, and his husband, who is a fashion designer, and they live in Toronto with their dog. And they have a son who's now an adult. There's a trip to the very tiny town of Beautiful, which is just outside of Saskatoon, and there are some murders. So it is a murder mystery, but definitely a feel-good kind of story. This book is described as a love letter to the prairies, and the way that the small town surprises this gay from the big city is quite heartwarming. So for example, they have a poker rally, which is done on skidoos, and you go from place to place collecting your playing cards, and at the end you see what your poker hand is, and half of the proceeds are the prize and the other half of the proceeds are donated to a charity that's voted on by the community. And in this particular year, they're going to Camp Firefly, which is an organization for queer youth, a summer camp organization for queer youth, which I just love. I just think that's so great. So the whole story is kind of like the Hardy Boys, I guess, and even Jake's last name is Hardy. But his sidekick, though, is a trans woman, Bass, and she's fab. She's just great. This is just pure fun entertainment. And I have a third queer book to tell you about. This one is a biography in a graphic format, Anaïs Nin, Sea of Lies, and it's by Léonie Bischoff, translated from French by Jenna Allen. Léonie Bischoff is a Swiss cartoonist, and she lives in Belgium, I think. Anaïs Nin had quite an interesting life. She was most well known for her diaries, and this book is based on her book Henry and June, and Anaïs was in love with both Henry Miller and his wife June, and she had sex with a lot of people including her psychiatrists. Right, left, and center. She was in bed with them, and she wrote about it all in her diaries. The depiction of Henry Miller is very interesting in here. He can never say her name correctly. He calls her Anaïs, but his misogyny is pretty clear. He says, "You're something else. I've never known a woman with a spirit. I consider you my equal." And meanwhile, Anaïs is worrying that he is putting her on a pedestal. Yeah. And the art in here is so pretty. I really, really like the use of color against a light background throughout this. Yeah, truly gorgeous illustrations by Bischoff. Next, I've got another book in translation. This time, I've got the actual book to show you, The Lantern of Lost Memories, and it's by Sanaka Hiiragi, and it's translated from Japanese by Jessie Kirkwood. I learned from the book jacket that the author is a huge fan of cameras and photography, and you can tell in this story. The tagline is, "What if you could revisit the moment when everything changed?" Which is a premise that's used in a lot of fantasy novels. This one is set in the afterlife, or the period right after you die, but before you move on to the next place. And it's in 3 sections, which are interconnected. It's kind of a blend of the cozy with some pretty horrific things. And while I thought this book was okay, and I initially gave it 3 stars, on reflection, I downgraded that to 2.5. So I don't know who to recommend this to. Let me know if it sounds like something that you would like better than I did. One of the things that really bothered me is the portrayal of a neurodivergent character in such a stereotypical way. It had me cringing. And there is also a scene of horrific mistreatment of a child, which ends up turning out all right, but still, I found it quite disturbing, especially because it seemed to be used mostly as a plot point. Anyway, not really my cup of tea. Next is an audiobook that I do recommend. It's called Frostbite: How Refrigeration Changed Our Food, Our Planet, and Ourselves. And it's by Nicola Twilley, and the audiobook is read by the author. Nicola Twilley is the co-host of the podcast Gastropod, and I have listened to that podcast for years. So I really liked hearing her voice. Some people might find it a little bit unusual. She has a British accent that's kind of blended with I don't know, American or something. It's not a typical British accent, but she's lived in the States, I think, for quite a while. So the Gastropod podcast looks at food through the lens of science and history. And that's what this book does as well. Although in this case, it's the topic of refrigeration. And she goes all the way back into how cold has been used to preserve food for a long time, and the whole development of refrigeration, ice blocks and ice houses. When I was growing up, when we lived in a log cabin, we used to have an ice house built into the side of a hill near our cabin, and I can remember my dad and his brothers cutting ice blocks out of the lake to store in sawdust there for the winter. So I knew what she was describing here in this book. She did get to witness people still cutting ice blocks somewhere in the northern states. Oh, so refrigeration has become so important to our the food chain, the food delivery system, although a lot of that is unseen. So huge storage warehouses where food is kept, sometimes for years, and refrigerated trucks, refrigerated train cars, reefers, the refrigerated containers. I learned that there was a woman scientist who spent months at a time in a converted container, traveling in a ship to find out what was going wrong with these early versions of the refrigerated containers and why sometimes food was arriving spoiled. She made lots of suggestions that improved things. I learned that nearly 2/3 of everything on your plate in the US is processed, shipped, stored, and sold under refrigeration. She says an unchanging produce section at the grocery store every day, everywhere across the world. This ought to inspire awe, yet it's so familiar that we pay attention only when there's a hiccup behind the scenes and shelves are temporarily empty. There's a whole lot about meat. Vegetarians might want to skip that. I'm going to go on to some details about orange juice. I learned that in order to preserve orange juice, it gets processed to such an extent that it's like a brown sludge. And although water and volatile flavor molecules have been burned off and saved, and then out of these more than 300 different chemicals, they get added back in again. But because they come from an orange, according to the FDA rules, you can say that it's 100% natural orange juice. But instead of frozen concentrate, which is now less popular, the liquid orange juice gets flash pasteurized, de-oiled, and de-aerated, and it's stored for up to a year in massive tanks, millions of gallons of it in refrigerated storage. And once again, with chemicals added in for the particular flavor of a brand. So whether it's for Tropicana or Coca-Cola or whichever brand of orange juice. And this is called fresh, not from concentrate. When she was talking about refrigerator design, she talked about how the French door style that have two doors that open at the middle and hinged on the sides, and how popular those are. People had working fridges that they gave up because they really wanted to have that two-door style. And she mentioned that in France, these are called réfrigérateurs américains. And a lot of the statistics that she's got in here just blew my mind. Here's one. American families stockpile food to such an extent that they overflow into second refrigerators in garage storage areas. Nationally, 1 in 4 households has 2 or more fridges. Some have dozens. 2 or more fridges? I don't get it. Now, across the world, more and more people are wanting to have refrigeration. And she says, refrigerating food for a global population of 9 billion using today's technology would reshape tomorrow's planetary environment in the most disastrous manner. Climate change-induced crop failures and drought will ensure that there is no harvest to store unless we change how we cool our food. And she gives the example of how in Rwanda, they're trying to increase their food exports by using refrigeration in some innovative sort of ways. And that's tied into this next statement. Food waste is used as a justification for refrigeration, but refrigeration also seems to encourage waste. The US has the world's most developed cold chain, yet it wastes almost as much of its food by percentage as Rwanda does for lack of one. She also talks about going to Svalbard, to the seed bank there, and she and the other people in the group, there were other scientists were there, weren't able to go in because there had been so much rain that rain had gone in under the door and shorted some of the electrical systems, and so it wasn't safe. And this rain was a sign of how much the climate has changed, because this was unprecedented for, way up north of the Arctic Circle to be having this kind of weather. 2019 was the warmest and wettest in Svalbard's history. That was the year that Nicola Twilley was there. They'd had 112 consecutive months of above average temperatures. She says no other place in the world is heating up faster. And she ends the book talking about ways that we can reduce our reliance on refrigeration, which I found very encouraging. Next, I have a book that I do not recommend. It's called Paris Soireés, and it's by a pair of French creators, Philippe Petit-Roulet and François Avril. It's a wordless graphic novel. It's supposed to be funny. I found there was this disgusting racist portrayal of a Black woman that turned my stomach. I just want to say, avoid this at all costs. If you see this in the Hoopla database and think, oh, this looks cute, Philippe Petit-Roulet, oh, I've heard of him. He's quite a well-known French illustrator. Well, he was. He died last year, but he did a lot of children's books, cover of a New Yorker a while back. Anyway, no, stay away. I do not recommend this. Paris Soirée is wordless. I am going to end with an absolutely fabulous wordless graphic novel, and this one is suitable for all ages. Well, 7 and up, or possibly even younger. It's called Viewfinder, and the two creators are Christine Chung and Salwa Majoka. 2 young Canadians who are also film animators, and in Viewfinder, Chung does the storyboards and the drawings, and Majoka does the colors. It is the story of a person in a spacecraft who comes to Earth, and you can see that it's an Earth far in the future. Something has happened. We don't see people on the planet. but there are all these glowing mushrooms everywhere, even on animals, mushrooms growing out of them. And yeah, they seem to have taken over. There are ruins of cities and other things that were built by humans that have trees coming up through them. There's a lot of greenery everywhere and glowing mushrooms. And the sense of wonder through this whole book just gave me such a great feeling. Yes. The authors say that they were inspired by Sean Tan's The Arrival. And yeah, you can see that this is kind of in the same vein. You don't need words. You just kind of discover things as you go along. This book is on so many best of the year lists, and I recommend it too. And that is all I've got for you today. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you are interested in any of these, if you've read any of these. Let me know what's good. What are you reading these days? I always like to hear that. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. So do say hello down there and stick around for a few minutes if you want to watch some of the ultra fancy outfits that are incorporating gold at the exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum. Thanks again. Bye for now. See you soon.